I've been watching the Jungle Book song about apes wanting to be human, and I just have to. I, I, I know it's a good movie and it's historic or something, but I mean, I just have to point out this one little problem. It's kind of the most racist thing in the history of all time. It well, it's not as racist as the Bugs Bunny cartoon with the things and the black. I don't know if it was a guy or a girl, but there was this cartoon of a black kid being essentially a Looney Tune or something with the lips and whatever, and it just sort of seems like the most racist thing in the history of time, which is kind of annoying because if you think about Disney, you think, oh, racism, bad for its time, whatever. You think this is racism because you might consider it a very racist thing, but in reality, Disney, the time in Disney, it was way, 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 way more racist than what you might think, because when you think about Disney and you look at this, you think I'm calling the song racist because it's kind of, oh, hey, it's humanity and white people thinking other people are race are monkeys and whatever. No, no, no. It's because you think this is the extent of the problem. I mean, post 1865, you might think that slavery just up and ended in the U.S., but 4 million people don't just stop being slaves and what their masters give up on trying to get them back as slaves. I mean, I think there's an estimate of something like 800,000 people over the decades who lived in something called abject slavery, because essentially what they did was they took over the legal system. They had corrupt judges and corrupt police officers. And while little black people remained in the South, they used, they they went to a black person and said, you did this crime, whether they did a crime or not. And it was like a 5-cent crime where wood was stolen from a fence or whatever, and they essentially got 15 years on that. And if they did something remotely serious, 35 years. It all ended in the 1920s. Yes, the 1920s. That's really a century after the Civil War. It all ended in the 1920s when white people heard about this white person who ended up in one of those slave mines, because they had slave mines where they got slaves from the legal system to work, help out the Industrial Revolution. You'd think, horrible conditions is the worst part of the Industrial Revolution, and some old stories about child labor. People living in abject slavery were allowed to contact their families through letters, but those people, they were treated much worse than the slaves of the mid 1800s, right before the war happened. I mean, we're talking about 11, 14-hour shifts inside pitch darkness, a mortality rate of about a third. 16-year-olds were common. Teenagers were common there. It's not just, 90% was it teenagers, kids. No, I mean, 12, 16-year-olds would be sent there to, for decades on end, without rest, work in a slave mine, taking out coal, because they're slaves. After 1465. And you think about that, if you know about that, and you think about, Disney, the association to fucking apes. No, it's much more brutal than what you might think. Lynchings, they're not just crowds of people at night going to a tree and hanging someone or lynching someone. We're talking about post abject slavery, maybe during abject slavery. Crowds would gather and watch a man get torn to pieces like he was an animal. Literally, like they were butchering an animal. I mean, crowds of picnics with people's kids. Have you ever heard of how some steakhouses let you choose your own cow to eat? Picture that, only they butcher the cow on stage and you buy the bones as collectibles. People would rush to the location of the murder, take the bones, and people who couldn't get to the location, they would buy the bones and stuff as collectibles. That. And you think about this, you think back to feminism and you think, yeah, some women wanted to get a little bit of respect. Yeah. If people had that kind of mentality about murdering a black person at that time, I don't think the feminist winning the vote thing was that simple. I mean, people were mental. And they weren't like today's people, only radicalized and whatever. No, there's this principle of how societies grow in intelligence the more access they have to information. The internet made this incredibly available, made different things incredibly available, and so we have grains and stuff. But people in the 1800s, I mean, there's some Russian that asked the farmers questions, and essentially it's all the bear in some place there's white bears. All the bears are white. What color is the bear? Blah. And they don't comprehend. Oh, bear. It can be white. It's just, it's hard to explain. Sorry, too much sugar water. Which, by the way, if you have cancer, there's a hell of a lot of sugar in a lot of places you might not think there's sugar. Obviously, this thing has a ton of sugar in it, but seriously, there's all kinds of names for sugar, and sugar has been known to accelerate cancer growth. So, another video, whatever. Now, the point is this. You might think it sounds like a loose connection when you look at Jungle Book and you hear, oh, the monkey wants to be a man. Oh, what? Why are you connecting that to sociology? What? It's a monkey that wants to be like a man. That man wants to be like a monkey. What is that? It's a kid's movie. What? Walt Disney used to be an informant for the FBI. You know, the Cooper years FBI, and you might think, well, Red Menace, this, that, covert spying and things. It was bad, but it's not corrupt. It wasn't corrupt bureaucracy. It was Lyndon Johnson casually financing the massacre of 1 million Indonesians, and when COINTELPRO, the thing before the CIA, COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence, blah blah blah, it fell because they had assembled a list of 300,000 left-wing people, just volunteers or whatever, and were financing, I think it was 5 or more radio stations that the government financed covertly radio stations to reinforce a right-wing propaganda lie. People don't even know that in 1962, the U.S. tested something called starfish prime. It's a real thing. It's not a conspiracy. It's actual historical fact. The project was called Starfish Prime, and they send up a nuclear warhead at a high altitude to see what happens, and it's essentially left the planet with a synthetic layer of radiation. How many nuclear tests were there post-World War II? There. Yes. Have you guessed? 2,053. 1,031 of which were U.S. tests, 700 plus Russian, and they only kept up with America later on.